Chapter 86, Blueline. Gojo and Geto barely made it to class before the second bell rang. Whispers still erupted throughout the room when they entered. Gojo looked over the edge of his glasses and scanned the students as they walked to their desk. The voices hushed and curious eyes looked away. When Geto sat down, he brushed his thigh against Gojo's, eliciting a crooked grin. Gojo stretched his arm over the back of Geto's seat, and Geto wished he could lean into him as Yaga launched into a presentation on Japanese spiritual traditions. Gojo shifted in his seat every few minutes. He watched as Geto dutifully took out his notebook and pen. Gojo copied him, but he was doodling instead of taking notes, bouncing his leg up and down. Geto reached over and placed a hand on his knee to quiet the movement, forgetting the prying eyes of his classmates. Gojo put his hand on top of his a split second before Geto lifted it away. Gojo stopped fidgeting when he noticed Geto's interest peaked when Yaga went over the history of how Buddhism spread from India to China, then to Japan. He remembered how he wanted to take him to a service at the temple, even though Gojo was not religious himself. But he appreciated the silence of the temple grounds, usually too peaceful for cursed spirits to hang around, and it seemed to recharge Geto the last time they were there. He could tolerate sitting through service if it's something Geto wanted to do. Yaga sat at his desk, looking for his training notebook to go over his next lesson with Gojo and Geto. It was free study, and everyone was bent over their textbooks or notebooks. Everyone except Gojo. Gojo thought he was being discreet, but he hovered over Geto, snatching his pen out of thin air after it rolled off the desk, watching Geto review his notes, grinning at him if he made eye contact. Yaga saw it all. He sighed as he flipped through the notebook pages. Gojo's devotion to Geto was both an asset and a liability. It stabilized Geto, but had the potential to take away his independence if left unchecked. After watching them in hand-to-hand training the day before, he saw their old rhythm and instinct there, but their balance was a little off. Gojo carried the weight of both, and Geto leaned into it. Yaga had to redirect them to harmonize and balance each other. Yaga put stabilization/synchronization training down in his book. As the rest of the class headed to the locker room to change for the track, Gojo and Geto headed to Jujutsu headquarters to train in the chambers. Soft lighting illuminated the gold tapestries tacked to the walls. This room was smaller than the other ones, and Gojo noticed Yaga didn't set any barriers. He waited at the edge of the mats, digging his socked feet into the weave as he watched Geto and Yaga in the center. Yaga wanted to get a sense of Geto's cursed energy output control, and he was attaching sensors to Geto's temples. As he wrapped the sensors around his wrists, Yaga looked at the bruises, purple blurring into green. He was still curious, but didn't ask. Yaga straightened out the sensor wires and plugged them into a small black machine. Breathe. Watch your posture. All we're doing is seeing if you can keep your cursed energy output consistent for 5 minutes, Yaga told Geto as he waited for the machine to finish calibrating. He pulled out a stopwatch from his pocket. Geto closed his eyes and took a deep breath, stretching his spine out and relaxing his shoulders. Ready? Begin in 5, 4, 3, 2. Yaga flipped a switch on the machine. On the console, Geto's cursed energy glowed yellow on the holographic display. The lines were curvy, showing the fluctuation in his levels. After a few seconds, the line straightened out and stayed steady. Hold, Geto. Time starts now. Yaga clicked his stopwatch. Geto tried to clear his mind and focus on his breathing. 5 minutes seemed like an eternity now that he was conscious of the time passing by. He inhaled and exhaled slowly, fingers fluttering as he reminded himself not to clench his fists. This was harder than it sounded. Then he remembered Gojo gushing about how he hadn't leaked any cursed energy. The yellow line on the display spiked. Stop. Yaga checked the time on his stopwatch. Geto only made it 2 minutes in. I'll give you a moment. Yaga waited for Geto to reset himself. Geto rolled his neck, wrung his hands out to loosen his fingers, and closed his eyes again. After a few deep breaths, Yaga counted down again, and Geto, determined to get through this exercise, closed his eyes and cleared his mind. He reached a point where he thought he fell asleep standing up when Yaga called out to him again. He looked up and Yaga held a thumbs up. Geto heard Gojo's muted footsteps approaching. Gojo clasped him on the shoulder, and Geto looked over at him and smiled. Yaga had Gojo and Geto stand back to back and attach sensors to Gojo, plugging the wires next to Geto's wires in the console. He changed the display. Geto's line glowed yellow and Gojo's was blue, but instead of their colors meeting in the middle, the blue overpowered yellow until there was only a fraction of it at the edge of the screen. Yaga hadn't given them any instructions yet, but looking at the current display, he wondered if they'd be successful in completing this exercise. The objective here is to balance your cursed energy. Maintain your flow. Don't overpower each other. Our goal is 30 seconds of perfect balance. Yaga reset his stopwatch. Begin in 5, 4, 3, 2. Yaga watched the display, waiting for Gojo and Geto to get oriented. The blue line on the display didn't move. Geto's yellow line was still pushed to the edge. Geto shook his head. Satoru, you're smothering me. He was trying to match the feel of his energy to Gojo's, but every time he did, Gojo raised his. Gojo, used to covering Geto's spiking levels out of a need to protect, brought his down. Yaga watched the blue line on the display inch closer to the middle, but not near enough. Geto reached out to meet Gojo, but once again, Gojo's cursed energy curved over his. Before Geto could scold him again, Gojo backed off. Geto felt for the edges of Gojo's energy and brushed against it, waiting for Gojo to do the same. When they finally met in the middle, the blue and yellow lines were even on the holographic display. Hold. Yaga pressed the button on his stopwatch. Gojo and Geto easily met the 30-second mark. Good, Yaga confirmed. That's it for today. He heard Gojo sigh in relief as Yaga moved to turn off the machine and unhook the wires, but he sensed something off and looked up in time to see Geto waver on his feet. Suguru. Gojo caught Geto as he fell and held him up as Geto's knees gave out. Geto steadied his legs and leaned into Gojo's chest. Dizzy, he said in a low voice. Gojo kept his arms around him. Take your time. I'm right here. Yaga was going to turn the console off and retract the wires when he caught the display. Gojo's blue line stretched all the way across the screen.